In this video, I'm going to be focusing on three things. Where do we actually position this wheel and how deep should we be setting it? What is the best way to operate this tool? How do we do preventative maintenance? So first, let's talk about the wear. And so the first setting to play with when you're working with this is that you want to be loosening this green wheel here, and then from that you can set the depth for where you want it at. But for what depth should you be aiming for this to be penetrating the ground? Well, there is a short answer and a long answer. And so the short answer is 5 millimeters or half a centimeter or 1/5 of an inch, depending on what currency you prefer to measure things in. But the long answer is a bit more complicated, and that is because no two lawns are similar, and so you have to change this according to every lawn that you use this on. And so in every patch of grass all across the world, there's going to be 3 layers. So there's going to be the grass layer, the thatch layer, and the soil layer. And so what is a thatch layer and what's going on here? Well, the thatch layer is essentially the grass roots along with rhizomes and stolons, which is a fancy way of saying things that run the grass sideways underground. And so when you're edging a lawn perfectly, you want to be going right through the grass layer, slicing right through the thatch layer as well, but then very, very lightly skimming the top of the soil layer. And so with that, it is going to take a little bit of trial and error. And the best way to tell if you're making a good depth is through looking at your clippings. And so if you're only seeing bits of green grass, you're going too shallow. If you're seeing chunks of soil, you're going too deep. But if you're seeing grass along with its roots, and that includes sort of the more yellowy color of the grass that's sort of below the green grass, that means you've found your bullseye depth. And so the best way to figure out your depth is to look at your clippings as your performance metric. It's kind of similar to how a YouTuber looks at how many likes and subscribes a video gets in order to know whether they've made an informative and useful video. Wink wink, nudge nudge. And so a fundamental part of the lawn care process is knowing what order to do things in. And so with this, you want to be using the edger first and then the line trimmer second. And the only exception to this is if you're sort of using a line trimmer to pre-cut down an overgrown jungle. And for a mower, you do that last. Now, why do we use this before the line trimmer? There's a couple of reasons. One being is that you can set the boundaries before you use the line trimmer. The second reason being that when you finish, you're very likely to find little spots that you missed or little things that aren't quite perfect. And whilst a line trimmer sort of can double up as inaccurate edger, an edger cannot double up as a line trimmer. And so I find it's just much more convenient when you're finishing the job just to be able to fix up your little mistakes with a line trimmer, as opposed to having to take this attachment off and then put on the line trimmer again and so on and so forth. Alright, so now on to the next question. Do you walk this forwards or do you walk it backwards? You walk it forwards, and there's a couple of reasons for this. And so with this blade here, you'll find that it'll be moving forwards as you move along. And with that, you want to be sort of working with the wheel rather than against it. If you go forwards, you're more likely to be cutting the grass, whereas if you walk backwards, you have a high probability that this could accidentally rip the grass in the thatch layer, which is going to create sort of uneven and messy looking chunks, as opposed to being able to cut through it where it'll give you a neat straight line. Also, when you do it this way, it almost feels a little bit like a self-propelled or self-moving tool, where if you sort of hold it at the perfect angle, the wheel actually sort of slowly moves you forward as well, and it's very easy just to kind of just walk it along the ground. Now, with that being said, some people do prefer to go backwards, as they claim that it's better for your accuracy and it's better for sort of doing awkward corners and what have you. With that, I say each to their own. But one thing I should really mention as well is that when you're using this, it's very easy to get fixated on what you're cutting. And when you're moving forwards, you're quite obviously going to see any trip hazards that are going to appear in front of you. But if you're going backwards, it's going to be very easy to not see something or someone that's snuck up behind you and then trip over backwards. With all that being said, I'm always going to be using this walking forwards. Alright, so now on to the next thing. How do you actually aim this and how do you actually know that you're getting a perfectly good straight line? And so the first thing here is to actually use this little bump on the guard here. So this guard perfectly lines up with the blade here. If you sort of keep this parallel with the footpath or whatever line you're trying to keep, you'll get a pretty good result. And now second thing you have to your advantage is this grass guard here. You notice that there's a little slit in the middle of it, and so you keep that slit in line with the line that you're trying to keep as well. That'll make it a bit easier. And the third thing here is it's more of a physical tool than a visual tool. We can actually rest this against the side of the footpath, set your wheel at the appropriate height, and then just let this skim across the side of the footpath as you're walking along. and that gets very neat lines. And probably the last thing that you should know about operating this tool, this is a skill, and the more you use it, the better you'll get. With all that being said, the best result that I've ever gotten out of my lawn from a session of mowing was with using this tool. Now, one thing that some of you may be afraid of is that you can appreciate that this is obviously much stronger than a bit of plastic line, so if you do happen to hit a bit of a surprise rock or angle it in the wrong way to hit something hard in concrete, what you'll find is that it'll be a couple quick little sparks, and then the tool would actually sort of disengage itself where it'll stop spinning. And then with that, all you have to do is take your finger off the trigger and then put it on again, and then the tool will resume spinning again. Let's move on to how we actually do preventative maintenance on this tool so it can last as long as humanly possible. Now with Ego, they do have the idea in mind that you buy the tool once and it lasts you for the rest of your life. But in order to achieve that, we need to do our part as well in looking after the tool. And so first things first, when you have grass clippings all over this, you want to use whatever dry method that you can think of to get all the grass clippings off. Just be mindful not to scratch the guard if you're using anything sharp. And pretty much the only thing I have to warn you against doing is not to use a jet of water to get to this. I mean, yes, you can use this on wet grass, but this is water resistant and not waterproof. And with water jets, you'll find that the water getting into the motor, and then it's going to cause problems later on, obviously. Now, once you've gotten all the big bits off and you just want to get it really nice and shiny and clean, you can use WD-40 to spray all the metal components. And then once you've done the WD-40 and you're happy with how it all is, you wipe off all the overly wet bits, and then spray on Inox MX3, or failing that you have that in your shed, you can just use any general silicone spray. And the reason being for this is that with soil and water, it is a perfect recipe for creating rust. And then you add on WD-40 as well, and if it's not wiped off properly, it can actually attract the elements that bring in rust. So the reason you put on this silicone spray or MX3 spray is that it sort of creates this very thin layer that prevents oxygen and water from getting to it, which in turn also prevents rust. Now, if you want to swap out this blade, there's a little bit of a process where you have to pull out this cotter pin. And this cotter pin is cut to the top here, so you'll need needle nose pliers to sort of fold it straight. Then you can pull it out, and then from here you just basically take off all the flanges, and then you can take the blade off. And I find this is the perfect time to actually do a good thorough WD-40 clean as well, followed up by Inox spray obviously, and then sort of put it all back together and put the cotter pin back in. Now when you buy this brand new, it comes with 2 cotter pins, and so if you do damage this cotter pin, you don't need to panic too much. And now one last thing for a bit of preventative maintenance as well is that you'll find this little screw here which requires an Allen key. And this is basically just for the oil change. But if you're a domestic user like myself, you won't be needing to do this for a very long time. And when I say a very long time, I mean like years. And so anyway, hopefully that is enough to help you get started on this tool. If you feel like that I brushed over the details of the multi-tool power head, please feel free to see my other video about the line trimmer. And as per usual, thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, queries, or doubtful points, please mention it in the comments and we can discuss. Thanks for watching.